Hi, I'm Nairy, and in this video I'll be taking you through the Awakened Carnifex Maximus Vardorvis encounter. As a combined boss set, the Awakened Desert Treasure 2 bosses make up the most mechanically challenging encounters in old school Runescape, and in this short series of guides I'll be walking you through how to cheese each encounter step by step so you too can get your hands on the highly coveted Ancient Blood Torva kit to craft your own Sanguine Torva set. If you would like more information on this video, or any of the other cheese guides I make, click more info on the movie information box on YouTube to learn more. Also be sure to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button to the left to be automatically notified as I release new guides. Now if you're not already familiar with the standard Vardorvis encounter, I'd recommend watching one of the various guides out there and practicing the basic mechanics of the fight first. Now much like the normal encounter, at its core the fight remains mostly the same. However, the pace at which you move through the fight, having to react, move and pray is significantly faster. But what I'll show you is that with a few simple tricks, Vardorvis will become a sort of pat your head and rub your belly type of encounter. First I'll cover the NPC highlights, then go into the mechanics, with a few other plugins which will help you along the way, some tricks to make things run smoother, and then lastly I'll cover gear and setups at the end, as it's more important to focus on the mechanics and how they intertwine than your gear, as you cannot brute force your way through this. So to start with, let's go over the NPC highlights. To mark the axes, under the Better NPC Highlight plugin, enter the following IDs into the True Tile section, and pick a highlight and fill colour to your liking. Then under the True Tile or Tile, add Vardorvis. My preference is just to add him under the regular tile marker in a different colour. And finally, add the following ID to hulls, to mark the outline of the heads which spawn out of the ground. In addition to the audio cue, this should help you to see where the head is spawning from, and to quickly pick up what projectile is coming towards you. Next, let's go over the changes from the normal encounter. In addition to the baseline increases in its stats, the boss's health is doubled from 700 to 1400, with an extra axe spawning throughout the fight. So 3 axes spawn until you reach 50%, thereafter 4 spawn at once. Additionally, the axe is damaged on spawn, so you must stay off the axe spawn locations and instead have your home position just slightly away from the pillars as you can see on screen now. In the Awakened fight, the axes are by far the most dangerous part of the fight, and throughout the encounter should be, above all else, your primary focus on dodging before attempting to do anything else, as these are capable of hitting up to a 96 off of melee prayer, and will cause you to bleed for much more damage afterwards, if you manage to survive. Next, with the Strangle Spore or Capture ability, all that changes is that you have less time to react and destroy all of the spores. And finally, the Head Gaze ability can also use a magic attack. With the 2 heads spawning below 50% and in a random order, can attack with either magic or range, and whilst in the Enrage phase, below 33%, these can attack almost back to back in a volley of up to 5 pairs of attacks. Tendrils do also continue to spawn from the ground and can damage you, but with the method I'll show you, these can almost be completely ignored. So for a general overview of the fight, it should look something like this. Throughout the entire fight, tendrils will spawn from the ground, which you need to dodge to avoid taking damage, and at times, Vardorvis can also use Strangle, so click the spores to break free from the stranglehold. From 100 to 80%, 3 axes will spawn. From 80 to 50%, 4 axes will spawn, and Vardorvis' head will sprout from the ground and shoot a magic or ranged projectile at you, which can disable your prey if you don't correctly protect against it. From 50 to 33%, 2 heads will spawn and shoot projectiles, and then from 33% to 0, the back-to-back volleys of projectiles from the heads will begin. In its basic form in this fight, you need to react and perform an action on almost every tick on an 8-tick cycle, whether that be moving from one position to another, switching your prayers in a manner which feels like it's every tick, or simply doing nothing and waiting. And what will help you during this entire fight is the Visual Metronome plugin on Runelight, and what you're going to do is copy the following settings on screen now, setting the tick counter to 8, enabling it above your head, and adding a tick cycle reset hotkey. I chose Escape, but you can choose whatever you feel most comfortable with. Enabling this will allow you to see what tick you're on in the cycle. Now if you're unfamiliar with game ticks, check the wiki link in the description below to learn more, and if you're unfamiliar with this plugin, I recommend getting used to its presence in several normal fights first. What I'll cover now is what I'll call the rub your belly part of the fight, axe dodging. Now the reason it is so important that you know what tick you're on is because the axes spawn from the edges and corners on an 8-tick cycle, and if we were to start the tick cycle with the axes spawning on tick 1, by tick 3 you need to move from the home position to the corner and back on tick 7. Let's take a look at an example. The axes spawn from the nearest corner and you click to move to the corner as soon as you see the 3 above your head. Then with the next incoming axe, at tick 7 you move back, and you can continue to do this regardless of whether or not an axe is spawned from either corner to help get you into a rhythm for the entire fight and help learn this core movement. In doing so, the tendril attack can be completely ignored as you will never take damage from it, providing you're moving backwards and forwards from the centre to the corners on ticks 3 and 7. What will help keep you in this cycle is a 4-tick slash weapon, like a Blade of Saeldor or an Abyssal Tentacle, as these will allow you to get into and keep in a rhythm by unknowingly forcing you to attack on ticks 3 and 7. Despite 5-tick weapons like a Scythe or an Osmond's Fang on paper looking like they deal more DPS, you will lose ticks attacking with these, you will be forced out of cycle, and will ultimately end up making the fight in some way feel far more complex than it really is. I 100% do not recommend using any 5-tick weapon here. Stick to a 4-tick weapon like a Blade of Saeldor or an Abyssal Tentacle. To correctly set up the tick counter, what you need to do is hit your reset key, in my case escape, when the axes reach the opposing edge. In this way, the axe should always spawn on tick 1 and reach the edge on tick 8. At times the strangle ability will cause the cycle to move out of sync, so just repeat the process of resetting the cycle as soon as the axes reach the opposing edge or corner. And then for some reason, the cycle is also hard-coded to move out of sync at the end of a random axe rotation, so make sure you're aware of this, and if you notice the axe is beginning to spawn out of cycle, hit the reset key as the axes reach the corner or edge to move back into cycle. Next up, I'll walk you through the pat your head part of the fight, the projectiles. As coupled with the axes, these can feel overwhelming when combined together, but in reality, like I've mentioned before, as long as you understand how the cycle works and what to do on what tick, it'll feel much simpler, in theory. What really helped me to see which head attack is which is using the Vardorvis Projectiles plugin on RuneLite, and setting this to COX, as these were by far for me the most familiar coloured projectiles I could work with. Green orb for range, purple orb for mage. If you can easily see which is which, just ignore enabling this, or if you prefer another style like TOA or TOB, use these instead. So I may have lied slightly. There is actually clearly multiple layers of attack cycles, each clearly layered one over another. One for the axes on an 8-tick cycle, one for Vardorvis on a 5-tick cycle, and one for the head pairs which spawn, sometimes pairs which are 6 ticks apart. What matters is that you only pay attention to where you are in the axe cycle, as this is what will kill you if you don't pay attention. At times, the attack cycle of Vardorvis will move into sync with the axe spawn cycle and head spawn cycle, and to save a long-winded explanation, at times you will need to move and switch prayers in the same game tick. Switch prayer again the immediate tick after that, and then switch prayer back to melee the tick after that. This could be moving and switching on the second projectile, or the first, or this could also be moving and switching on the second axe. Just understand that at times you will need to dodge the axe and switch your prayer on the same game tick. But if you feel like you can only manage one action in that moment, the priority must always be on dodging the axe and not switching your prayer. An unprojected projectile will hit you for around 5 damage, the axe however can hit you for a 96. Yes, your prayer will be disabled and you will take 1 melee swing, but the max Vardorvis can hit is around a 61. Just know that you will have time to switch your prayer back on, even in the volleys. If during the middle of a volley your prayer is deactivated, don't bother attempting to re-enable pray melee. Look for the next incoming projectile and pray against that to move you back into the prayer switching cycle, as you won't be able to re-enable pray melee before it will really count. You will take a melee hit, so focus on getting back into cycle. This way, by the time you're into the next cycle, you can pray against the next incoming melee attack. At times you can get the worst RNG imaginable, and have back-to-back head spawns on top of double axe spawns. So this is why it is vital on moving on tick 3 to the corner and tick 7 back to the home position. This must feel like second nature and become your baseline movement in the fight, so when the inevitable volley starts, all you're doing on top of that is switching prayers a tick apart. I'll admit it may sound confusing, but in its basic form, that is all the fight really is. Dodging axes on a near fixed cycle on certain ticks, and being aware that you need to switch prayers and move at the same time in a prayer switching cycle. What I would recommend is watching my example kill videos and slowing them down to 25%, to see what is happening on each game tick and where I'm attempting to reset the tick cycle. I'll also be releasing a walkthrough after this video, so make sure to subscribe and look out for that video. Next, I'll go over a few tips, which have helped me along the way. Vardorvis is one jittery and twitchy boss, so clicking him can be an absolute nightmare. I have no doubt that during the fight you will click his arm which shoots out sideways, so to combat this, what you're going to do every single time you move is perform a standard click to move to the corner, but always use a shift click to move back to the home position. This way you will always yellow click to move and not red click and unintentionally attempt to attack the boss. Additionally, after moving you will check where Vardorvis actually is before attempting to attack, as sometimes it can drag you out unintentionally, which is likely to cause you to panic and die. As the strangle spores need to be destroyed faster in the awakened encounter, as soon as the axes stop spawning, begin to rapidly click all over Vardorvis' hitbox so that as soon as the spores show on screen, you may, in a good way, accidentally click several spores in a single tick, saving you time and health. Additionally, whilst in the stranglehold and waiting for the spores to spawn, or the fight to re-engage, you can eat without losing any ticks, which will help top you off. And finally, you want to enable game sounds and area sounds, as these will act as audio cues for when the axes, heads, and spikes are spawning. Now let's take a look at gear. Depending on your budget, you should look to bring a setup similar to the one shown on screen now. As I mentioned before, you'll want to use a 4-tick weapon throughout the entirety of the fight, and an Abyssal Tentacle is just fine. You'll definitely want to be using a Blood Fury to help manage the attrition rate of your health throughout the fight, and if your budget can stretch to it, use a Bellator ring. The additional slash and strength bonus is extremely noticeable, so noticeable in that it's almost as if you're wielding akimbo defenders. I'd highly recommend bringing one if you can afford it. If not, a Ring of Suffering will also do. There is no need to bring a light bearer here, as you will not be able to gain an additional spec off during the enrage phase when it really counts. You want to maximise your static DPS in this case. A Void Waker is an excellent option for a spec weapon, as it will allow you to reliably land a higher amount of damage to reduce the time spent in the enrage phase. Dragon Claws also work fine, however you'll need an additional action to re-equip your defender, and when you're already under a lot of pressure, a Void Waker is definitely the preferred option for this reason. In your inventory, you'll want to bring runes for thralls and combo food to keep you topped up during the fight, and during the enrage phase, topped up to max and over to minimise the chance of getting comboed off prayer, if you miss a flick or an axe. You can bring Karambands if you prefer to triple eat, although I prefer to just bring additional anglers. Lastly, you can bring one with you, or you can pre-pot a Minifight Remedy as soon as you leave from a bank, and it should last the duration of the fight. When you're combo eating, every 15 seconds or so this will restore your stats, allowing you to keep combo eating and keeping your stats at a reasonable level, minimising the need to restore immediately after combo eating. However, this may take some time to get used to if you don't often use these. And that brings us to the end of the guide. Now rewatch the video and take a shot every time I say the word cycle. Then hit the like and subscribe button if this has helped you out, and look out for the next Awaken guide. Did this help you out? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next walkthrough. Peace!